What's going on? What's going on? It's your boy, Story Seller Jet, with another episode of the That's So Fire podcast with the one and only Cesar Hernandez. Bro, it's so awesome to have you here in the podcast today. And I can't wait to learn a lot from you today. So, are you ready to get started?
Bonsoir. Let's do it.
Bonsoir, mon ami. So first of all, this guy is fantastic. He has done a lot of really great project as it relates to PR, government relations. You work with Tesla, you've worked with Uber, and a lot of really big names out there. So I guess let's start a little bit and share a little bit about yourself and who you are, and a little bit about OmniPublic.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Cesar Hernandez. I am the managing director, founder of OmniPublic. We're a full suite public affairs, public relations, and strategy firm that really specializes in introducing new concepts and ideas into the marketplace, and we navigate media, government, and industry.
Man, yeah, man, super pumped to having you here in the studio. And let's get started. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in the world of public relation and how you came to establish Omni Public?
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, but in order for me to really do the journey justice, I really got to talk about like where everything started for me, right? And then as I go through that, you'll see how what I do now kind of like makes sense, right? So I'm originally my family's heritage is from Guatemala,
Wow,
right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so we're Guatemalan, but from a specific tribe. So I'm Quiche Maya. So like my heritage is like is legitimately my hemisphere, right? So I'm families born, raised, and they're from the jungle, right? And my great grandparents fought as like guerrilleros, so they fought in the rainforest. Specifically, my tribe is the tribe that fought the Spanish when they first got here. So our last king, Tecunuman, fought Cortez.
Wow.
And to give you an idea as to like just the misunderstandings of warfare between the Spanish and the Mayans. So Tecunuman, when he went to go strike Cortez, he hit the horse, and the horse died. And while he hit the horse, Cortez came in and stabbed him in his chest, right?
Wow.
And so to this day, we have there's the national bird of the Mayans and of Guatemala is called the quetzal, and it has like a red chest. And it said it has a red chest because it landed on Tecunuman's chest, and it's forever tainted with the blood of our last king. So, reason why I say that is for generations, my family has been fighting, right? And my grandmother's grandfather fought as a guerrillero against like private companies like the United Fruit Company Incorporated, which was an American company that was going in and trying to take over the agricultural industry of Latin America. So he fought against them. It got so heated that Mayans started giving up their children to the Catholic orphanages in the Catholic Church. So by droves, like children just being dumped off into the major cities. And then what do? They started giving away these children and they became almost like indentured slaves.
Wow.
And it was like legal slavery. And then
Mm,
but by the time they turned 18, just let them off in the streets. So
yeah.
you got a bunch of 18-year-olds running around the streets. So tremendous inequalities, right? So my grandmother grew up in abject poverty. And here's where the story gets interesting. She started working in political consulting, communications, PR, shifting public opinion, right? And began to mobilize people in Latin America and in Mexico. And she got to a point where it wasn't safe for her. So when her friends started ending up getting kidnapped and going missing, she came to the United States. And so she went from, the literal jungle to the concrete jungle, and she ended up in Brooklyn, right?
Brooklyn.
Yeah, shout out to Brooklyn. And so now I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, but my grandmother was super political. So she's always voting, always organizing, right? And she always instilled in me just like that hunger, right, to do better and like to go at it. And so that's a whole other story being raised in Brooklyn. But when I got to USF to Tampa, I ran for student body president, right? And then running for student body president, I won. And what I didn't realize was that when you become student body president at a state university in the state of Florida, you're a trustee, right?
Interesting.
Super interesting. Way too much power for like a 22-year-old.
Absolutely.
So you become a trustee. The only way you become a trustee is either you win student body president or the governor appoints you. And then so you make a salary and you are, since you collect taxes, right, as a student body president, you're under sunshine law. So
What is the sunshine law? What does that mean?
essentially, sunshine law is a law that governs all public officials in the state of Florida.
Mm,
It's in the sunshine. So certain things like you can't accept gifts, right?
interesting.
You can't meet with specific authorities unless it's like a public hearing, right? And so I had a crash course in politics, in government, in navigating titans of industry because the other trustee board members were like, the CEO of Tico, right? Or one of the owners of the Lightning at that time, right? So you get a crash course in politics, enterprise, comms, cadence, right? And that was really the start of my career because it's where I developed my first relationships, like Congresswoman Kathy Castor. I met her when I was student body president,
Wow.
and now I work with her in her office, like in government relations, like as a lobbyist, right, for clients and accounts, right? 'Cause it's a relationship driven industry. So
This
I
is
would
an
say that's how
incredible
it started.
story. This is an incredible story so far, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And really just to kind of sum it up, right? I became student body president. When I was done with being student body president, I got into community organizing. And so I worked for a nonprofit and working with like disenfranchised individuals in Suitcase City in Tampa, realized that the system wasn't built for people who were non-participants in government. Then I became a legislative aide at City Hall. Then I worked as in a political consulting firm. Then I became a lobbyist.
That's incredible.
Then I started my own shop.
Yeah. So that's an incredible journey. Thank you for sharing that. And I did not know much of about what you just described. So thank you for sharing that. So I know that you've worked with a lot of really big organizations out there, including Tesla and
Mhm.
Uber. Can you tell a little bit about those projects? Are you able to share any of the things that you were able to work on with them?
Yeah, I could definitely I could discuss those. This is early on, right? So it's like 2016, 2017. I was a intergovernmental relations person for a government agency in the state of Florida. And so what that means is like I was a lobbyist, but for government. And I was lobbying other governments for that government, if that makes sense.
That makes
So
sense.
I would essentially lobby and lead contract lobbyist teams on a state level and on a federal level, so like in DC. And in doing so, like my job was something called public-private partnerships, which looked at, government's role isn't to innovate, right? Government's role is to curate and sustain, right, and protect the citizenry. Uh, the private sector's role is to innovate. There's a happy median, sometimes a gray area where it's called public-private partnership, where government is funding an initial project, but the private companies coming in, government subsidizing it, so making it cheaper, but producing something for the community.
Hmm.
One of those things was a rideshare company that exclusively used Teslas. And
Interesting.
so we pitched Tesla to use their vehicles to run them in a rideshare component, like a Uber, but exclusively Tesla only, and use them in areas of Tampa Bay where there was no transportation initiatives. So wherever the bus didn't go. So like say rural parts, right? You will get picked up in a Tesla Model X and then be connected into like the transportation system or take it in that area. Um, and that has evolve. So if you look at Rebel, right, in New York City uses Tesla. That was my project. Like I developed that in 2016, 2017, right? If you look in Tampa downtown, there's a thing called Dash, right? They used all my data, right? That was like I developed these things very early on. So that was a project I did with them that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Out of all those projects that you've worked on, which one would you say that was the coolest one or the most memorable one that you've had?
I think the most memorable, I have two projects that are gonna outlive me, like for sure, right? One of them is Hyperloop, right? Are you familiar with the Hyperloop
I
system?
yes, I am.
Right. So for like the uninitiated, Hyperloop is a system that you can go in a capsule in a vacuumless space, right? So like a tube, and you would be able to travel i- up to like 700 miles per hour,
It's
right?
crazy.
So it's the future of transportation. So what does that do? You can get Tampa to Miami in 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Like cities become communities,
Yeah.
right? Like it'll transform everything. And so I worked on some of the very first language to allow for Hyperloop systems to exist and to work with governments and be implemented and be federally regulated.
That's awesome because the very first time I heard about Hyperloop, I was still living in Toledo, Ohio. And that was like 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Mhm,
And now to come here in Tampa, where I'm living, and obviously meeting you, to know that you were part of the original language
mhm.
building for all the stuff. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, they were building one out in Ohio,
Yeah,
right? Through NOACA at that time, which is like the transportation authority. They were looking to connect like Cleveland, all the way out to Pittsburgh, right? So yeah, and
yeah,
so the company that I was working for at the time, those were some of the initiatives they were doing. So I would do the communications for it, and then specifically in the state of Florida, looking at creating the legislation that would allow for Hyperloop systems to be implemented in the future.
that's awesome.
And one of those first studies was published and produced, and so that language that they're gonna use in the future is a language that I helped curate.
That's crazy.
Yes, sir.
Incredible. What's the other project that you said that would outlive you?
Other project is we developed a Latin Tech Accelerator program, right, through the SBA and the support of Congresswoman Kathy Castor and the Tampa Bay Wave and the Latin Chamber. And we recruited 25 of the top companies from throughout Latin America to come and build, scale, and grow their companies in Tampa Bay and in Florida. Four of them are moving their entire companies to Tampa Bay. I
Incredible.
believe that at least one or two of them will be billion-dollar companies. So as you can imagine, what happens naturally is you have an exit, you build a billion-dollar company. Once you have that exit, you create wealth and you look to reinvest that into the very same community that helps that stand you up. So when generational wealth starts to get poured in and it looks like individuals like me and you, it attracts more individuals, and then you start to create a new society, right? Where people are making money and they're investing into each other. And so that's something that I think will outlive me. And then when this region is diverse, not just in demographics, but in investing and in the type of ideas that are coming in, it'll probably be because a small part of that accelerator program.
That's awesome. So the goal for this podcast is to share a lot of tips, insight for, like, entrepreneurs, the audience that is watching this video, that they can go and implement within their business. So the very first question that I have for you, for startup or small businesses that are interested in PR, what are some of the primary benefits that they have in investing in something like this?
Well, I would say that public relations, like public perception, is marquee, regardless if you have a company or not. Like in this arena where like people are Googling you, searching you, looking at your social media, like you are in a fishbowl, whether you want to accept it or not. Like it is what it is. So if you're launching a company, you got to scrub and see when you Google search me, Bing me, or look me up on IG or on Facebook, what do I look like? Because you could look good in person, but then when you go ahead and interact with people, they're going to look you up. Hey, are they legit? Right. And depending on what they see, if they see you doing keg stands, right, or if they see a DUI, it's gonna mess with like their perception of you. So personal branding and PR is crucial. And I would say it magnifies if you're a CEO because brand is everything. It
Absolutely.
is a currency. And if
Yeah.
you don't have the appropriate brand, right? Just like cash flow is the lifeblood of a company, branding is the lifeblood of an executive. So you need both of them, right? It's legitimately a currency. And if you don't if you're empty in your branding currency, I guarantee you nobody's going to want to do business with you or trust you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So how can PR help a company build brand awareness and credibility in their industry?
Well, for one thing, PR is going to help you with recognition, right? So, say you talk to an agency and you want them to represent you, right? Do they have the relationships to represent you well? Say, for example, you work with an agency and they get you on a Forbes. What would that do for your brand, for your currency,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, a lot.
If now you Google me and you're on Forbes next to like an Elon Musk. Oh, this person's legit,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you one thing, since brand is so important, like say you went to an outstanding academic institution, say you went to Harvard,
Yeah.
right? You Google search, oh, this dude went to Harvard. What is your perception of that person? It's altered, right?
100%. Like I would immediately consider hiring that person over like any other person because of, their education. I would think that they are way ahead of other people, even though that's not may be true, but the perception of that is kind of what I would be like very interested in.
Correct. Not everybody can get into Harvard, right?
Prestige.
But in order to mitigate that, what if you saw that person in the New York Times? What if you saw that person in Forbes, right? They may not have the Harvard, but they were doing something exceptional that these hard credibility indicators are now signaling this person or this enterprise is legit, right? So, number one, what PR does for branding, proper PR will elevate your brand and it will give you credibility forever. Because those hyperlinks go nowhere. They go nowhere. They will follow you for the rest of your life.
So here's a question then, for the people that watching this video. Obviously, you talk about like putting them on a magazine or something like that. What are some of the different avenues that you can use PR to propel you or to show you um, in the public eyes?
Yeah, so these are the things that you should be thinking of. Number one, public perception is transforming, right? So PR, the way that PR is done is evolving. It used to be, hey, get me on, the Times or the Wall Street Journal or Forbes. And those are great for searchability. And we call that legacy media. But now, new media are people that are creating voice, right? And they're lending their voice to you, magnifying yours. Podcasts, Instagrammers, right? TikTokers, right? Twitter space interviews, X interviews, right? Whatever, what have you, which can generate and garner just as much views, if not more engagement, but also credibility. But if you bring those two together, you become a titan, right? So I'll give you an example. Say you get on Forbes, right? And so legacy media now is saying, oh, this person's legit. They're on Forbes. You search that individual, they're on Forbes. But then they get on Joe Rogan. Whoa, this person's super legit, right? They're credible. They're on Rogan. They're brilliant. But now that person also does a collabo with Mr. Beast. You just hit every demographic. You hit legacy, so the titans that are accustomed to reading Forbes. You hit those individuals that are looking at, like, Joe Rogan is the top, right? When it comes to podcasts,
Podcasting. Yeah.
it is number one. But then you're on Mr. Beast, you're getting everybody that's 8 years old to 65, right? So imagine what would that do? What people are doing right now is they're typically good at one or the other. What the most like supreme thinkers and strategists are doing is they're trying to bring all those things together, right? So if you look at Elon Musk, he was starting to get a bad name in legacy media and in social. So what did he do? He started doing some legitimate podcasts. And then he did something else. He bought a social media platform. I'm going to control it. Brilliant, right? So the legacy media could talk as much smack as they want, but I'm going to cut you off because I own one of the social media platforms and you don't control platforms.
Yeah.
So 2 out of 3, I got.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I did not think about it that way specifically. And I've been telling a lot of people too that when somebody's looking to hire you, what is the first thing that they're going to do? They're going to Google you.
Mhm.
And if they don't like what they see when they do Google you, they're probably going to choose their competitors over you.
Mhm.
So, like by doing the podcasting or like being featured on other podcasts and doing, social media and all of these things, that is building the trust and credibility for the people that are searching for you in your business. So, I'm glad that you shared that. So, next questions for anybody that is interested, what would be the very first step that they should take when they want to delve into PR?
Well, I would say the first thing they should do is invest into like their own brand. You are your first form of media. So scan and look at how you are perceived on social media. Like, what does your Instagram look like? What kind of messages are you putting out on Instagram, right? What does your LinkedIn look like, right? You don't need to have a YouTube channel, but like Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, like what are you tweeting, right? You should create a landing page, right? Buy your domain name, right? janedoe.com, johndoe.com, put up a landing page with your bio on it. Easy things that you can do if you're super active on these things will begin to rank on SEO without having to go ahead and get published somewhere, right? If you can identify and do these things organically, the next thing that you should do is if you have a company or something legitimate that you're trying to promote, reach out to the local business reporters. Don't reach out and say, "Hey, can you write a story about me?" Reach out to them and say, "Hey, look, would love to grab some coffee with you. I noticed that you write about some of the things that I do. Just want to cultivate a relationship.
Love it.
Grab coffee, grab lunch. Instead of you trying to push it, let it happen organically. And if they don't respond, a lot of these reporters do panels. Go to their event, hit them up. Hey, love what you said. I really enjoy your column. I'm working on similar things. Would you mind if we just kind of grab coffee?
I love it. That's awesome. And I've also seen a lot of people and some mutual friends of also like going to the news, like, being featured on ABC where they have like a segment and all of that. So, what are your thoughts about that specifically as a PR strategy?
No, that's awesome, right? I mean, whenever you're doing now, my expertise is enterprise, right? Startups, business. You should always consider 3 things whenever you're looking at doing PR as an executive or a founder. Is number one, local, right? So look at doing things organically, locally, your local biz journal, your local Times, your local Herald, Chronicle, whatever have you. Establish relationships there because they're going to hold you up. They're like foundation,
Yeah.
right? The second thing is industry,
Hmm.
right? So if you're a tech company, what industry related publications make sense that are saying, hey, this individual leading this kind of technology is legit. So say if you're in medicine, you want to be in Becker's, right?
Yeah.
Or Medical Daily, right? So industry is a signal to the industry that suggests what they're doing is legitimate. What local does is signals the community, I am a legitimate entrepreneur businessman. Now, the national stuff like the ABC, the Forbes, the Inc., the Entrepreneur, that's a layer of credibility so that if local comes to you, industry comes to you, and they land on your page, they see Forbes,
Yeah.
right? They see the hard credibility indicators, right?
Yeah. And also, it's a really good thing too when they come to the website and see that you were featured on Fast Company, that you were featured in Entrepreneur Magazine. That adds, the trust and credibility as well when they are able to see all of those areas that you've been able to, be featured and share yourself as a thought leader as well.
Correct. Correct. And that's exactly how I would position it. And it's very powerful, right? People who have navigated and orchestrated history have mastered public relations and public affairs, whether it's for good or bad. There's no historical figure that has not utilized public affairs in some fashion for their benefit,
Yeah.
right? Napoleon, when he was banned to the island of St. Helena, was writing his own biography and memoir and distributing it. And now, think about it. He lost at Waterloo. What is the perception that we have of Napoleon, right?
Yeah.
My ancestors, the Mayans, you know what's the difference between the Mayan ruins and Stonehenge?
What is that?
I have no clue what Stonehenge was about. You know why?
Didn't document it
They
well.
didn't write about it, but I got hieroglyphs that says, "Hey, that's the Jaguar Temple. That's the Sun Temple. This is where the market was." Right?
Yeah.
So now we realize they must have been an intelligent civilization. We know exactly what they were doing. We know all their kings. And in Stonehenge, we're like, we have no clue,
Yeah.
but it must be significant as a bunch of stones.
Yeah.
So it changes the way you look at public affairs and PR. Only thing that it is that you know we have new names for these things.
Yeah. So, what are some cost-effective ways that, or strategies that a startup or small business can implement without breaking the bank?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing is create a landing page, right? If you can create a landing page and a newsletter and have people subscribe to your newsletter. Because what happens if you're given legitimate value, then you can share that newsletter and other people will share it, right?
Yeah.
And this is why that's important, a landing page and a newsletter. Because when you send any information out to a news outlet, say start locally, call them, right, at 8:30 AM, right?
8:30.
8:30 AM. So they typically get into, like, their editorial meetings at 9, right? Say you have an announcement. You write an announcement or, like, a press release. Send it to the booking producer or the info box at your local station. They're not gonna respond, but you're gonna call them. "Hey," and have your press release ready. "Hey, we're having this thing. I'm launching this thing. I sent you a press release." They're gonna be super rude because they're in a rush. They're gonna be like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. What press release? Da, da, da. I didn't get anything." That's a lie. They just want to say that because they're rushed. Say, "All right, cool. Well, what's your email? I'm gonna send it to you direct." "All right, we'll send it to this, and then and the fourth." Boom. "All right, just send it to you." Hey, I know you're getting into your editorial meeting at 9. I'm gonna call you at 10. That's when you get out. "All right, sounds good." 10 o'clock comes. You call again. "Hey, does this make sense? What are you thinking?" And you know what? Sometimes whatever they planned for the day blew up. And they're like, "Hey, you know what? Can you interview today?" And you're like, "Yeah, absolutely, I can interview today." You just got your first news hit.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So one of the very important part of all of that is obviously target audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how important for a business to define their target audience and their messaging also before embarking on the PR initiative?
Oh my God. Super. Like you have to understand who your avatar is. Like it is extremely important that you understand who you're speaking to. I'll give you an example. If you're working with like an influencer and say their demographic is, you know, individuals that maybe are making 60 to 100K a year and you're selling a high ticket item, they may have 5 million followers. You think they're going to buy that high ticket item? Probably not. But say I have 150,000 followers and everybody that's following me is 35, 45, right? 500K to $1 million a year, and I have a high ticket item, probably have a higher probability. You need to know who you're speaking to. Like my client, I know what they're reading. I know where they're shopping. I know what they're watching. I know what they're dressing like. I know their language, right? I know them. When I talk to my prospect, it's the same person over and over. I know
Wow.
their challenges. I know what they're going through. I know what their needs are. I'm finishing their sentences. I know my person. I know what kind of cologne they wear. I know what kind of watches they're going to have.
Wow.
Like that's the kind of relationship that I have with my customer, right? My avatar. If you don't have it down to that point, then you really need to kind of like rethink how you're positioning your product.
Yeah. That is excellent. And that's one of the things that I would like say, like, that's so fire because that's probably one of the very most important things that people needs to figure out before they can get out there, use PR, use all the different strategies to promote their business. You touched on this a little bit earlier. What I want to get in there a little bit more deeply. What role does content creation play in PR?
Content creation, it may seem secondary, but it runs in parallel, right? And here's why. This is something we do for clients, right? So I have a client that's dropping on NASDAQ news. Typical agency, once you drop on NASDAQ, hey, here's a backlink, I'm done. Congratulations. That's very archaic. Hey, here's a backlink. Here's a social media tile. Here's a caption. Here's a reel that we're going to create around it. And we're going to repurpose this. And you're going to talk about what you talked about in NASDAQ. And then you make that as a reel or a short form video content. Now you can repurpose it where? IG, YouTube Shorts,
Yeah.
TikTok, right? And so now if you took an article that had zero motion, right? And it's going to get the views because people are going to go there. But now you create motion around it,
Yeah.
right? And it starts to live and it's pervasive. And that reel may go viral in a couple of weeks. Maybe it's a month. But even though that article dropped a month ago, when you create motion around it, you magnify it. So the best of us are doing legacy stuff, right? Legacy media, but then we're backing it up with content.
I love it. I love it. One thing that I noticed for you specifically is that you are really active on social media, like producing content. I remember even way before I met you, probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. I remember your content would become to me all the time. Um, Obviously, very polished, well dressed. That stoic pose that you always have. um Way before I met you, I was seeing all of that. So what are some of the strategies and why are you doing social media content, like producing reels, producing videos, or doing all the other stuff? What is the reasoning behind that?
Well, the reasoning behind that is number one, I want to be able to get my expertise out, right? And what I hate, like I have, like it's abhorrent to me. It's a lot of people make stuff up, right? They're making stuff up and people are eating it up and they're taking it as though it's gospel. And it's not. Like, I know what you're saying is absolute trash. And so I needed to begin to practice what I'm preaching with content. Like, I advise clients to do this because I know it, but I wasn't doing it for myself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to create knowledgeable things that my audience would look at and say, oh, I can use that because I'm an agency owner. Or a potential customer can say, I like him. He knows what he's talking about. Or just a regular individual that may be inspired by some of the things that I'm saying, right? And so I think content is super important. That's the reason why I produce the content that I am doing. And now what's working is I'm shifting a lot more into talking about all aspects of me as a brand and as a CEO and as a founder. And it just so happens I have my company OmniPublic. And if you want to work with us, fantastic. But I want my brand to speak for me and I want my offerings to speak for me, right? But then also the follow through.
Yeah.
That's what's key. You can have a fantastic brand and people buy in, zero follow through. And I won't name any names, but I've seen influencers go through that where they have a quality control issue because strong brand, zero substance.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't want that. You want a brand, but then you want to be an actual subject matter expert in what it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. So, next question for you: what are some myth or misconception that about PR that entrepreneurs should be aware of?
Yeah, I think that the biggest misconception is that if I land on one piece, that I got it made in a shade or that I'm going to sell my product. It's not. It used to be like that. Like, hey, you get on the cover of the New York Times, like you get into Forbes, like you're going to blow up, or you get on Good Morning America, like you're just going to blow up, right? It's not like that anymore. You know why? Because attention is becoming a huge form of currency. And right now we have a lot more attention circulating.
Yeah.
So before it wasn't that, right? We have 5 channels. So you get on one of those 5 channels, you're talking to everybody. Now you got TV, you got streaming, you got
Yeah.
social media, you got YouTube, right? You have the currency of attention is flowing at such a pace that now you need to back it up with legacy media and new media. Reels, IG, Twitter Space, et cetera, right? So it's not just one hit. There can be, right? There's still that anomaly where it's like, hey, you go viral. But then it goes back to what I was saying. Yeah, you could go viral. Now they land on your page. What do you got?
Yeah. What is the converting factor
What do
after
you
that?
correct? So
Yeah.
it's like, what happens? And then it's cyclical. So if it's cyclical, the best thing you could do is you have to be you have to have constancy, right? So you have to be the one that's consistent while the cycle keeps going up and down. You stay steady and constant.
That's great. I love that. So now that they have their process and their PR performing, or they started producing content for all of that, what are some ways that businesses can measure their efforts as it relates to PR?
Yeah, but so there's a couple of things, right? Things have become very sophisticated. So there's a lot of tools, right, that measure total media exposure, which looks at not just a publication, but then say, hey, here's a publication, here's how many people shared it on socials. And then there's media exposure, which is just specifically, I landed in the business journal. This is how many people view that, right? But then you can take these two items and you can look at what is the cost versus if I ran an ad. So per dollar, if I ran an ad with this dollar versus organic PR, what is the return?
Yeah.
So say if you're paying a retainer of anything between 5 to 15K a month on public relations instead of running an ad for 10 Gs, right? But you got more through organic and not like sponsored paywalls, it showcases that. But furthermore, what you should do is drop in a specific link that'll measure each outlet, right? So if you landed on a USA Today, put in a link there, how many people came to the website through that piece, and then measure and look at all of these things, and then just double down on the ones that are the most effective.
I love it. I love it. One of the most memorable presentation, and I've sit through a lot of them that you've
Yeah.
made, was at a mastermind that we both are members at, board of advisors, and he was talking about crisis communication plan.
Mhm.
Can you share with the audience what steps that anybody should take as it relates to prepare for a potential PR crisis?
Yeah, I would say first Google yourself and add words like scam, Google yourself and add words like arrest, Google your company and add words like scam, see what comes up. You'll be surprised. Maybe a YouTuber is going to come up, maybe somebody at a social media talking smack is going to come up, right? But what you should do is number one, purchase your domain name of your actual name and place the landing page. Think of it as like I purchased this digital asset or like this digital property, then nobody can then put anything on. Because if somebody did write something negative about you, your landing page already exists and will forever outrank a bad article,
Interesting.
right? And then another thing that you could be doing is say if you can take if say a negative press piece comes out, you can take the first couple of words on that negative press piece and create a domain around it and then link that to your domain, right? And then your landing page, since it had more authority, will outrank it over the negative piece, right? Because over time, remember, media keeps going and your reputation, you know, is stagnant, but media is gonna there's a new news cycle. So over time, when you start to do counter articles and link it to your landing page, it starts to push down the negative pieces. But it starts with a very solid landing page. Like you need that, right? Another thing that you need is open up all social media channels because it's going to be linked to you and your landing page. So if the more things that you put associated with your name and your company, the less space there is for some kind of negative press to live within it.
Yeah. That's awesome. That was a really great tip. Thank you for sharing that. Going back to like the government relations and all the other aspect, obviously you do more than PR.
Mhm.
What are some common mistakes that you see companies are making when they're trying to get public support for their innovations, and how can they avoid them?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're a company looking to engage with government, you really have to do opposition research on yourself and on the entity. Because what procurement directors are people who are making decisions as to who the government's going to work with are doing is they're literally just Google searching.
Hmm.
That's all they're doing, right? They're going to Google search you. They're going to look you up on LinkedIn. So if your LinkedIn is empty and sloppy, and if when I Google you, there's nothing there, it makes it much more difficult, right? So what you should be doing is if you're a professional in a specific industry like tech that wants to engage with government, an easy thing to do is post about those offerings on LinkedIn, right? And be active on it and be active on your socials when it comes to these items, right? So number one is if you're gonna have people look at you, make sure that the optics are consistent with what it is that you're offering,
I
right?
love it. Yeah.
So that's one big common mistake is like, oh, we're gonna go after this grant, but then like what I find isn't somebody that I'm gonna entrust public dollars to,
Yeah.
you know? The second thing is you don't have to wait for the government to issue out a RFP, so like a request for proposal, for you to engage with them. You are allowed to go and pitch them and say, "Hey, this is an idea that I have. This is a technology that I have. Would you be interested?" You could pitch governments all day long. You don't gotta wait for them. You can legitimately propose to to work with them, and their job is to make it compliant and how it is that you can engage with them.
That's great. That's great. I have just a few more questions and we'll wrap up here. But that was a flu. I don't know if that's even a English word, but like of really great information here, and I hope the viewers are getting a lot, from this talk. So my next question for you is, what advice do you have for a business or startup that is looking to hire a PR agency like Omni,
Mhm.
Public, and what criteria that they should consider when making this decision?
Oh, yeah, it's simple. Just look at three things, right? We're talking to a PR agency. Just ask them like, "Hey, uh, what kind of national media or industry media have you landed in the past week?" If they're generating this kind of stuff, like I probably generate $10 to $15 million worth of PR in a week, like me personally, right, for clients. Like I can show, hey, here's NASDAQ news in the studio today. Here's CNBC 2 hours ago,
That's
right?
awesome.
Here's my clients on these viral podcasts last week. If they can do that, then they're legit, right? If they can't, if they're like, oh, this is what happened 3 months ago, run.
Yeah.
It's like, unless got money to blow like that, right?
Yeah.
So, number one, hey, who have you landed in the past, right? Number two, give me a referral. If they can't come up with referrals that are within an industry that you are in, you don't want them to learn on the job because it's like your money, it's your resources, right? You want
Yeah.
somebody that actually can bring it on and start producing on day one, right? And then number three, ask who's going to work on my account, right?
Very crucial.
Yeah. So, like, am I going to get like the A team or am I going to get like an intern, right? Or am I going to get somebody that's very new? Now, I've had consultants that work with us that they're new and they're like rock stars, but I train them, right? So like they know the cadence, they know how to operate, know how to do certain things, right? So you want to know like who's on my team, and if it's not like the head people, hey, who trained them and who's working with them, and do I still have access to the top people?
Fantastic. Backstage, we were talking earlier, and you were talking about, I guess, a new strategy or a new thing that you're doing, which is related to podcasts
Mhm.
by placing different, people with, celebrities and
Yeah.
influencers. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, what I've been noticing is collaboration, like collaborative posts, right? Or taking one influencer and then collaborating with another one, and those things go viral, right? Um, we had a client of mine, Sean Mike, follow him on Instagram, phenomenal, right? Generated $1 billion in growth for his company, uh, and is just a phenomenal individual. And we partnered him with the School of Hard Knocks, right, on Instagram. Follow School of Hard Knocks with a Z, right? They give a lot of insight on finance. And so we did a collaboration where they interviewed Sean on his private jet, and he was talking about how he did it, right? And like how he scaled it and how he produced it. And when it dropped, he got 9 million views on Instagram, right? That's legit.
Absolutely.
That's legit, right? We did something similar with another client of ours, Eric Bosworth, right? And he was also on the podcast. And to give you an idea, right, Sean has over 500,000 followers. Eric has around 40. Eric got on it and did something very similar, give awesome impact, got over 1 million views in the first day. So you see what I'm saying? And these things are consistent with like their following, right? And what I've seen working with new media is oftentimes if you already have a strong organic following and you partner that with somebody else's audience and you merge those and create a collaboration, your views are going to go up and the engagement goes up because both your audiences who follow you for specific reasons, now you're bringing them together and you create this gray space where some are going to go to you, some are going to go to you. Some were already following the two of you and now they're feeding it, right? And so that's something that I've been tinkering with a lot of my clients down in Miami. And what's interesting, Miami's becoming like the capital of new media. I would
Interesting.
say that New York City is the capital of legacy media, right? Like CNN, CNBC, right? Fox, right? ABC, GMA, blah, blah, blah. All in studio, New York City, right? Miami is all of the influencers that you know either live in Miami or have a presence there, right? So they're becoming the capital of new media.
I love that. Follow up question to that. So I really like the fact that collaboration is a really great tool to obviously propel forward and, utilizing other people's audience with your audience to even get a greater reach. What would you say to somebody who is in the early stages of that, that doesn't have a following, but wants to kind of, grow their social media and doing all of that?
Yeah, it's easy. Consistency. Who cares? Like, are you in it for the long run or not? Right? And all it is consistency. It's not about, uh, oh my God, I haven't gone viral and it's been a year. Like I was listening to a podcast with Mr. Beast and Andrew Schultz, and Mr. Beast was talking about him being 13 years old and having like 20 views on his YouTube. That's demoralizing, right? You might think, but look at where he's at now. It's just straight consistency, right? And listen to other individuals that you may want to emulate and that you are attracted to as far as messaging, and then curate your own messaging around that or add to it, right? So just stay consistent and not just stay consistent, but stay on brand to what your brand is, right? It could evolve, but don't do things just for views. This is my opinion. So I've just started work with a lot more influencers, and I see almost like three different types of influencers. I see the ones that are just like views driven. I don't care what I got to do. I want views. There's no real like contribution to society, but I want views because I want to make money. I want an audience. And I'm not saying that that's wrong. I'm just saying that I'm observing that behavior, right? That phenomena.
Hmm.
So there's some that just want views, right? I'm gonna do pranks. I'm going to uh, you know, ask people for money, whatever it is. Pranks. It's like slap happy, whatever I can do. I'm gonna try to get arrested, views. That's interesting. The second one are those that are in a lane, right? And they're like, this is what I want to specifically focus on, right? So, whatever that lane is, business, scaling, enterprise, philosophy, history, whatever arena, and I am going to magnify this. Like, there's this one guy that's super interesting. His thing is books, old, ancient books. He could talk about books all day long. He has like 1 million followers on Instagram. All the book community, guess what? He got them books, right? And then you have the third arena that I think is the most proficient and effective. And it's the one that understands these two phenomena, right? What it takes to go viral without selling myself out, and what kind of content is so specific that it's intriguing, right?
Interesting.
So here are those people. Jordan Peterson, Intelligencia, understands maybe I got to push a little bit and I might go viral, my message is going to be heard, right? So these are the three arenas that I'm seeing, right? And like just my observations. And so I think it's fascinating. This is newer for me, but this is where public affairs is going.
Man, that was a really great talk, and I appreciate you sharing all this insight. If somebody's interested in working with you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, they could hit me up on Instagram, Cesar Hernandez Prime. I will say that I'm really not working with a ton of people because I've just got to a position in my career where I can just be very selective. I'm always open to like give advice, right? But I'm very selective as to like who I work with naturally because I take my expertise, I don't take it lightly, right? I am helping to create propaganda around the people that I bring on,
Yeah.
and it's a very dangerous thing. And so I don't take it lightly. And I guess the way that I even want to close or I want to say something, the biggest piece of advice that I ever gotten that was outstanding was never believe your own propaganda, right?
Interesting.
Never believe your own propaganda. The ones that do become megalomaniacs, right? Fidel Castro, Hitler. Don't believe your own propaganda. You're doing this, you're orchestrating this, right? You're curating this. Let others magnify your voice. Like once you start believing your own hype, you're going to destroy yourself.
I love it. There you heard it. It was awesome having you on the talk show right here. That's so fire, Evolution Podcast. Again, thank you again for tuning in and for watching this episode with Cesar and Hernandez right here. I've learned a lot from you today.
Thank you,
and
sir.
a lot of really cool thing too. I did not know you were from Guatemala and from
Yes, sir.
somebody being from Haiti. Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, mon ami.
I knew you had a Latin background, but I didn't know you was from Guatemala. So, yeah, thanks for having being on the show today. And for those of you watching this, I would immensely appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button for more awesome content like this. So, let's go. You know what it is? It's your boy Storyteller Jet. Let's go, baby. It's fire.